law of expansion: growth always increases your capacity. There is no finish line. Nike commercial. Have you maxed out your capacity? Have you reached your full potential as a person? I believe that if you are reading this, the answer is no. If you're still breathing and you are of sound mind, then you have the potential to keep increasing your capacity. In their book If It Ain't Broke, Break It, authors Robert J. Kriegel and Louis Padler write, we don't have a clue as to what people's limits are. All the tests, stopwatches, and finish lines in the world can't measure human potential. When someone is pursuing their dream, they'll go far beyond what seems to be their limitations. The potential that exists within us is limitless and largely untapped. When you think of limits, you create them. 1 inches. The potential that exists within us is limitless and largely untapped. When you think of limits, you create them. Robert J. Kriegel and Louis Padler. How do you push toward your potential and keep increasing your capacity? I've written quite a bit about how to increase your effectiveness externally. You do that by including others and learning how to work with people. But the only way to increase your capacity internally is to change the way you approach personal growth. Learning more information isn't enough. You must change how you think and you must change your actions. How to increase your thinking capacity? I've heard that most experts believe people typically use only 10% of their true potential. That statement is staggering. If that is true, then the average person has huge capacity for improvement. It's as if we possess hundreds of acres of possibilities but keep only half an acre under cultivation. So how do we tap into the unused 90%? The answer is found in changing how we think and what we do. Let's start by looking at how you need to think to increase your capacity. Most experts believe people typically use only 10% of their true potential. 1. Stop thinking more work and start thinking what works. Ask most people how they can increase their capacity and they'll tell you by working more. There's a problem with that solution. More work will not necessarily increase your capacity. More of the same usually results in more of the same, when what we actually want is better than what we have. I fell into this trap early in my career. In fact, when people began asking me to help them be more successful, my answer to them was to work harder. I assumed that their work ethic wasn't as good as mine, and if they would simply do more, they would be successful. However, I realized the error in my thinking when I started traveling to undeveloped countries where many people worked very hard but saw very little return for all their efforts. I learned that hard work isn't always the answer. That prompted me to start looking at the way I approached my working life. Being a high-energy person, I worked hard and kept it up for long hours. But I knew that I wasn't as effective as I could be. I realized that the problem was that I valued effort over effectiveness. I was doing a lot of things instead of the right things. My to-do list kept getting longer, but my impact wasn't increasing. I realized that I had to change my thinking. I looked at everything I was doing and started to ask myself, what works? That's what I recommend you do. Figure out what works. To do that, ask yourself the following 3 questions. What am I required to do? What gives the greatest return? What gives me the greatest reward? These questions will help you to focus your attention on what you must do, what you ought to do, and what you really want to do. 2. Stop thinking can I, and start thinking how can I. At first glance, the questions can I, and how can I, may appear to be very similar. However, the reality is that they are worlds apart in terms of results. Can I is a question filled with hesitation and doubt. It is a question that imposes limitations. If that is the question you regularly ask yourself, you're undermining your efforts before you even begin. How many people could have accomplished much in life but failed to try because they doubted and answered no to the question, can I? When you ask yourself, how can I? You give yourself a fighting chance to achieve something. The most common reason people don't overcome the odds is that they don't challenge them enough. They don't test their limits. They don't push their capacity. How can I? Assumes there is a way. You just need to find it. The most common reason people don't overcome the odds is that they don't challenge them enough. As a young leader, I was challenged by the words of Robert Schuller, who said, "What would you attempt if you knew you couldn't fail?" To me the answer was obvious. A lot more than I was currently attempting. Schuller's question prompted me to think outside the box. It made me want to take more risks, to push more boundaries, to test my own limits. It made me realize that most of our limitations are based not on lack of ability, but lack of belief. Sharon Wood, the first North American woman to climb Mount Everest, said of her experience, "I discovered it wasn't a matter of physical strength, but a matter of psychological strength." The conquest lay within my own mind to penetrate those barriers of self-imposed limitations and get to the good stuff, the stuff called potential, 90% of which we barely use. If you want to tap into that unused 90%, ask, how can I? Do that, and greater achievement becomes a matter of when and how, not if. Recently a friend gave me a book by Price Pritchett entitled, You Too. In it Pritchett writes, "Your skepticism, which you presume is based on rational thinking and an objective assessment of factual data about yourself, is rooted in mental junk. Your doubts are not the product of accurate thinking, but habitual thinking. Years ago you accepted flawed conclusions as correct, began to live your life as if those warped ideas about your potential were true, and ceased the bold experiment in living that brought you many breakthrough behaviors as a child. Now it's time for you to find that faith you had in yourself before. Point 2. If you have spent time in a negative environment or you have experienced abuse in your life, you may find this thinking transition to be very difficult. If that describes you, then let me take a moment to encourage you and explain something. I'm asking you to shift from can I to how can I, when maybe you need to change your thinking from I can't to how can I. I believe that if you've gotten this far in this book, then deep down you already believe that you can achieve things. I believe you can too. I believe God has put in every person the potential to grow, expand, and achieve. The first step in doing that is believing that you can. I believe in you. The second is perseverance. As you get started, it may not look like you're making progress. That doesn't matter. Don't give up. Pritchett says that everything looks like a failure in the middle. He writes, "You can't bake a cake without getting the kitchen messy. Halfway through surgery it looks like there's been a murder in the operating room. If you send a rocket to the moon, about 90% of the time it's off course. It fails its way to the moon by continually making mistakes and correcting them. 3. Everything looks like a failure in the middle. You can change your thinking. You can believe in your potential. You can use failure as a resource to help you find the edge of your capacities. As psychiatrist Fritz Perls observed, learning is discovering that something is possible. The law of expansion is about learning, growing, increasing our capacity. Learning is discovering that something is possible. Fritz Perls it said that one day the great artist Michelangelo went into the studio of Raphael. He looked at one of his early drawings, considered it a moment, then took a piece of chalk and wrote the word amplius, which means greater, or larger, across the entire drawing. Michelangelo was encouraging Raphael to think bigger. That's what we need to do. 3. Stop thinking one door and start thinking many doors. When it comes to growth, you don't want to stake your future on one door. It may not open. It's much better to consider many possibilities and look for multiple answers to all of your questions. Think in terms of options. I made the mistake of looking for the one door early in my career. I wanted to build a great church, so I went looking for the key that would lead me to success. I started interviewing people to find someone who could give me the secret. It was almost like I was looking for someone who could grant my wish. My thinking was all wrong. I wanted someone to give me a formula for my dream so I could act on it. In time I came to realize that I needed to act on my dream and formulate the details as I made the journey. Mobility was critical to progress, and my strategy began to evolve out of my discovery process. One of my favorite words is options. Anyone who knows me well understands that I don't like being fenced in, but my desire for options is driven by more than just the desire to avoid mental claustrophobia. It's driven by the desire to increase my capacity. The more time goes by, the more I want to explore creative options and the less I want to rely on someone else's system. As I have learned to think many doors and explore options, here is what I have learned. There is more than one way to do something successfully. The odds of arriving anywhere increase with creativity and adaptability. Movement with intentionality creates possibilities. Failures and setbacks can be great tools for learning. Knowing the future is difficult, controlling the future is impossible. Knowing today is essential, controlling today is possible. Success is a result of continued action filled with continual adjustments. Knowing the future is difficult, controlling the future is impossible. Knowing today is essential, controlling today is possible. The greatest challenge you will ever face is that of expanding your mind. It's like crossing the great frontier. You must be willing to be a pioneer, to enter uncharted territory, to face the unknown, to conquer your own doubts and fears. But here's the good news. If you can change your thinking, you can change your life. As Oliver Wendell Holmes remarked, man's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions. If you want to expand your capacity, the first place to start is always in your own mind. Man's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions. Oliver Wendell Holmes.